I'm Sasha Stefanovic from Purdue Men's Basketball, and you're watching Brags in the Stands.
Only 7 more months before we get to experience that. Let's cry it out together. Let's go. As always, boiler up.
The Bears, they started this new tradition last year where they celebrate their wins the correct way.
Waddle and Sylvie, ESPN 1000, don't miss it.
I know what you mean.
It's like their own Philly.
Okay. Okay, I think what it is.
We shouldn't be showing this. Am I crazy?
What a great sign that is. What have I told you? 17 minutes of rain would wash away 108 years of drought.
Do you see
are ridiculous.
Everybody hurts. Everybody cries. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are back, and this is Braggs in the Stands. I am your host, as always, Gregory Braggs Jr., and my co-host will be in here very shortly. Our guy, Craig Bowers, known for his very popular Facebook group called the Boiler Diehards with about 10,000 members. So if you're part of Facebook and you want to have some quality Purdue sports conversation, that is the place to go. And he'll be joining us very shortly. But obviously, bittersweet show today, wrapping up the Purdue basketball season, once and for all. Had some great ups and some pretty tough downs, no question about it. I know a lot of Purdue fans are very frustrated with how it ended. Losing to St. Peter's, the Peacocks, one of the most watched Sweet 16 games since I think 2011. So on the national stage, when the lights were brightest, the Boilers are handed another very tough loss to a high seed. Last year it was North Texas in the first round. This year in the Sweet 16 round, they fall to a 15 seed, who certainly didn't look like a 15 seed with the way they were playing, against Kentucky and then Murray State and then eventually taking down our Boilers. But then, to make matters worse, 2 days later, they play North Carolina in the Elite Eight game and get the doors blown off them. So Cinderella's slipper came off at that point. And, seeing a lot of different comments before we bring on our co-host. And, of course, our special guest for the night, who will be joining shortly, our guy Bobby Buckets, or Bobby Riddell, a.k.a. Bobby Buckets, who's joined us quite a few times here on Braggs in the Stands over the last couple years. I've just seen a lot of chatter, just fans trying to wrap their head around the loss, and I understand it. But, for the fans that want to try to say let's get Matt Painter out of here, I just think that is ludicrous. You're talking about a team that's been to the Sweet 16 for the last 5 years. Only 2 teams have done that who have been to the Sweet 16 more in that time frame. One being Gonzaga, who gets an easy street every time they come out to play in the WCC. They basically get hand gifted a number 1 seed by playing in the WCC, while Purdue's playing in the Big Ten every year. And then Michigan being the other team who is also in the Big Ten and certainly recruits well. But, that's just my overall point. To me, this is one of the greatest 5-year periods, if not the greatest 5-year period in Purdue basketball history. And yeah, when you get in the bigger games, the letdown is that much greater, of course, unless you win it all, or you at least, I know some fans I think would just take a Final Four appearance at this point. But to consider, to try to be a little rational and take a step back, they very easily could have, and you could argue should have been in the Final Four a few years ago with Carson Edwards and Ryan Klein leading the way, falling just short of Virginia, woulda, coulda, shouldas. But Virginia had a lot of things go their way at the very end of regulation there for them to be able to move on to the Final Four. If not, Matt Painter has a Final Four on his resume. And then I don't think there's very much chatter about Matt Painter not being able to get the job done or being able to get over the hump. I just think it's silliness, And then, yeah, of course, losing to St. Peter's is very disappointing, But if Purdue gets the job done, then that's 2 Elite Eight appearances. Again, woulda, coulda, shouldas. And some fans don't want to rest on those laurels. But, look at IU right now and how much they've scrambled to try to find the right head coach. Obviously, ever since Bob Knight left 20 years ago, it's one different coach after the other. And now they have, Mike Woodson in there who, got them to the tournament this year. They even won a play-in game. They played decent in the Big Ten tournament, but scrambling to try to find an identity in their program. Purdue has that. And so for fans that think that the grass is greener on the other side of Matt Painter, I'm sorry, you're mistaken. And honestly, you should take a step back and have a little perspective behind that and appreciate what the Purdue men's basketball program has done over the last 5 years and pretty much over, the entirety of his tenure. He's built a culture here that's worthwhile, and a lot of schools would kill to have the kind of culture that Purdue men's basketball. They're going to be okay. They're going to get their recruits. They got 2 guys that were 1 and 2 in Mr. Basketball. Last year they had number 1 and 2 in Mr. Basketball, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Caleb Furst. Now they have Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer coming here this upcoming year. And then the year after, Miles Colvin certainly looks like the type of kid that could be a Mr. Basketball candidate. So, it used to be when I was younger that every Mr. Basketball candidate went to IU, no questions asked. Now those guys go to Purdue. So, like I said, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. So we're here to lick our wounds tonight, and we got some people jumping in here to the stream. So I'm going to bring them on here. Here's our guy, Craig Bowers, Boiler Diehards, joining us. Yeah, I jumped the shark a little early. I want to get the intro out of the way. I didn't want to make Bobby.
No, it's fine. I was doing something, and I saw you share it, and I saw it was live, and I was like, oh shoot, I need to get in right now. So
no problem. And just to not keep him waiting any longer, in the chat, our guy Bobby Buckets, aka I keep saying Bobby Buckets, aka it's Bobby Riddell, aka Bobby Buckets, joining the show once again, the color analyst for Purdue men's basketball radio. How are we doing tonight, Bobby?
Doing well, man. Doing very well. Thanks for having me. And yeah, we get to talk Purdue hoops about this past season one final time, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're here to lick our wounds. I may cry. I don't know. I'm an emotional guy. May not have got all the tears out just yet. So we'll just start with you, Bobby. You were there courtside for all of this, throughout the season, following the team, flying with the team. You probably got a real good, pulse, on the heartbeat of Purdue men's basketball this season. What are your overall thoughts when you go back and look on this season a few years from now? How do you think you'll remember this particular team?
Man, that's a really good question. Certainly a successful season overall as far as wins and losses. 29 wins is very impressive. Second most in school history. To be able to knock off North Carolina and Villanova in consecutive days, to win the pre-conference tournament out in Connecticut was really impressive. That was a nice moment for the team, to get that championship moment early in the season. And then certainly throughout the year, just a lot of, close calls, a lot of missed opportunities with trying to get a couple other trophies throughout the season, of course, with the Big Ten regular season, the Big Ten tournament, and then that elusive Final Four. So just one of those seasons I'll look back upon, and I got a lot of fond memories, a lot of wins, a lot of excitement, particularly in the non-conference. Going undefeated in the non-conference was really exciting. But then I'll also look back on it and think, man, just a lot of bad breaks, a lot of close calls, a lot of bounces that didn't go our way that stopped this team from, bringing home some more hardware.
Yeah, without question. I was just going back the other day and watching the Sweet 16 game against Tennessee where Ryan Klein has his infamous moment, and you forget that Purdue was up 18 in that game in the second half and almost lost. It goes to overtime. And that's kind of the margin of error that you have when you're at Purdue and you haven't had the luck, you haven't had the glory of the Final Fours since 1980. And now that team, they made it through. They get to the Elite Eight. They fall short in that game, which was one of the greatest Elite Eight games ever played in a lot of ways. But they're remembered in a very fond light. Fans talk about that team. Heck, I think half of them would build a statue at this point of that team and those players because of the moments they had in the tournament. Is it surprising to you, or is it just kind of the breaks of what sports and college basketball is all about, that this team, who was top 10 all season for the first time since 1995, number 1 in the country, first time ever for the Purdue men's basketball program, a big deal, even though they did lose a couple games later to A couple days later to the Rutgers holding the number 1 ranking, and having this, and having a guy that could potentially be a top 3 pick in the NBA, all these different accolades. But as you mentioned, they fall short in the regular season title. They fall short in the tournament championship to Iowa, and then they fall short getting to the Elite Eight. Is it surprising to you or frustrating? How would you define that most fans will remember this team in a lot of ways with a disappointing eye?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be looked upon pretty much the same exact way that Isaac Haas, PJ Thompson, Vince Edwards, Dakota Mathias team was looked upon, and that team, did hit 30 wins, did hit that single season record for wins, but was not able to hang any banners, unfortunately, and that's what this team was unable to do as well. And so I think both of those teams will be remembered similarly as far as fan base will remember them for having lots of talent and being very successful and racking up a number of wins. This team, that team getting 30 wins and having that accomplishment, this team getting that number 1 ranking for the first time. So they'll be thought upon for those things. But of course, when you go into Mackey and you look up in the rafters, there won't be anything, that reminds you of those teams, of course, because of not being able to accomplish any of those main key goals that each Purdue team sets out for themselves at the start of each season.
Yeah, without question. I mean, that was why I was very excited when they got the number 1 ranking early in the season. I knew it was a possibility because of their preseason ranking. And I think it is a big deal to reach that point when you're a program that's never done that. I think that is something that helps with recruiting and all of that. But it certainly put a target on their back. But when you look at, like we had Isaac Haas on here like a month ago, and I think as time wears on, I think fans learn to appreciate what they did have. It's just in the immediate moment, the disappointment is what's going to be the first thing you go to. But then I think as time wears on, I think they'll learn to appreciate this team and the players on it. Craig, you jumped in, where you didn't really get to have your thoughts. So I want to give you the floor for a second if you want to share your thoughts on this season or the finish, and then when you're done, if you want to ask a question to Bobby, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, if we're going to look back on this season, and obviously you and I are really active on Twitter and Facebook and different social media spaces, and I see people talking about this season as just an extreme disappointment, and I don't get it. Like, man, this team won the second most amount of games of any Purdue team in history. And I mean, I guess if you just want to look at it strictly from did they get the trophies, the Big Ten regular season, Big Ten tourney, NCAA, whatever you want to say, they didn't check those off the list. But, man, this team took us on a hell of a ride for a really long time. And we won a lot of games, second most in Purdue history. Got the number 1 ranking for the first time. I just have a really hard time going, man, this season was a disappointment. Like, I don't buy into that at all. And we've talked about this before and gone back and forth and bantered on Twitter at different times and whatnot, but I'm not a big conference championship type of guy. So, like, to me, the tourney kind of is where it's at, even though I think it's all about matchups and things can just not go your way in the tournament. But to me, that's where kind of you hang your hat, plant your flag and whatnot. And, at the end of the day, they got a bad matchup. They got beat. It happens. It's happened multiple other times with teams that we thought were really, really good. It hasn't only happened to us. It also happened to Kentucky just this year. It's happened to Tom Izzo multiple times in the last 5 years. I look back at this season as a really successful season in terms of the number of games they won, the things they accomplished along the way, all of those type of things. And I don't really have a question for Bobby on that.
Well, I was going to piggyback off.
I just have a pretty strong opinion that I think we can call this season successful, regardless of whether we got a trophy or a banner along the way. But I understand why some fans don't look at it the same way.
Well, to piggyback off that thought, I mean, I've brought it up a million times on this show, just comparing Purdue fans to Cub fans, but it is in the same way just with the team. And Matt Painter's a big Cub fan. Bobby's a big Cub fan who I think I'm going to have to take to like 12 games this year to make up for his appearances.
I think we're up to 15 now.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to hear me talk that much. He'll probably just want to have me send him to the game with his family at this point because that's a lot of talking with Gregory. But at the same time, there is a lot of Cubs comparisons between the fan base and the team because the struggles and the drought. Cub fans waited 108 years, so I don't want to hear it from Purdue fans. I watched, in 2003 when the Cubs blew it, with Bartman and the whole bit. I watched 95-year-old ladies bawling in their season ticket seats. You want to talk about a finality of knowing you'll never see it. You'll never see what you waited your whole life for. That's what that lady was going through in that moment. She ended up obviously not seeing her Cubbies win a World Series. So for a lot of fans that haven't seen one, time is still on your side. And, to me, to bring it to the Cubs, the expectation level is just changed. And that's, I think, what a lot of fans are experiencing with this, people talking about should Painter go or, all these different things. This wasn't good. This season wasn't good enough. All these seem like very silly conversations. But I think what's occurring is Purdue fans now have a raised level of expectation that they didn't have 7 years ago. And that now they have made 4 or 5 Sweet 16s. They should have been in 2 Elite Eights. They should have been in a Final Four, potentially fighting for a national championship a few years ago, and maybe even this year if they had done some things right. So now fans are saying, this is not good enough. We want better. And that's a good thing. But they also, I think fans have to remind themselves that it's Matt Painter and the program that's built those expectations up. Or else you'd still just be happy making it to the Sweet 16. So that would be my plea to Purdue fans is when the expectations are raised, that means it's coming. That means you're closer, and that's a good thing. Bobby, in concerns to the St. Peter's game, being there, obviously with an extremely biased eye, obviously Purdue was nervous the whole game. It didn't feel good at halftime. It didn't feel good at any point throughout the game. It felt like the IU game at IU, just a raucous crowd that was completely against you, a defense that is mauling you against you, and you're doing everything you can to scrape and claw for points. But the one observation I did have, being extremely biased towards Purdue, was, man, did they foul the crap out of Zach Edey and Travion Williams. They're hugging them before the pass comes in every single time. Purdue recruits these bigs, Isaac Haas, Matt Harms, Zach Edey, Juwan Johnson, these dominant big guys. But what good does it do to draft a guy that's a mismatch if you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt from the refs on the mismatch? You saw the 80 free throws in the first 2 games, and people were like, oh, that's ridiculous. They earn that with the mismatches they create, in my opinion. Then you get to the St. Peter's game, and it becomes the old, oh, we're going to let them play that we've seen in more than a few games this year, in particular the games they lost. How does Purdue how do they fight through that? Zach Edey can't play tough. He looks like he's like a baby deer out there because he's getting mauled and stumbling around. But how can he play tough? I watch Kofi Coburn. He can chicken wing and get to the rim and slam it down, and they allow that for the most part. Not say that Kofi hasn't had his fair share of hacks not called. But Zach Edey, if he does that same chicken wing, it's going into a guy's chin. So how is he supposed to play tough and not get the calls on him? And conversely, how is he supposed to play if he's being mauled the entire game, him and Travion Williams?
Hey, before Bobby responds, I've got to say one thing. You can't put Juwan Johnson in the same grouping as Zach Edey and Isaac Haas. He was a completely different kind. He essentially was a taller than average power forward that was forced to play center.
Sure.
Now I'll let Bobby speak.
Yeah, JJ was a fun big guy to play with, but yeah, not the same. Just
Not the
dumping down
unique
to him.
big like these others were.
Yeah. No, I mean, you made some good points. I mean, that's the NCAA tournament. Like, it gets talked about the matchups, which is obviously massive, but also the officiating that particular day is always critical too, right? I mean, we got 3 different officials in that game, then called the Texas game, and the games were officiated pretty differently. I felt like I didn't think St. Peter's did anything egregious or over the top. That was like, there was a couple calls. Obviously, I felt like that should have been called fouls that weren't, but I didn't feel like there was just like Hacksaw Ridge out there or anything that wasn't getting called. But they played a very physical brand of basketball that in the Texas game, the officials were rewarding Purdue for a lot more bumps and maybe ticky-tack things like that, or 50-50 calls that weren't Purdue's way because Texas was physical and those officials did not allow that physicality when Purdue's big guys were inside, when they were going through their shooting motions, when their guards were driving on the perimeter, when they were pushing on the block. Like, the Texas officials in that game did not, allow Texas to be as physical. But then you fast forward to the St. Peter's game, and St. Peter's was extremely physical, both on the perimeter and on the block. And the officials allowed them to be more physical, which is, like you said, we saw that a lot in Big Ten play at times, and that hurt Purdue. And it's kind of funny because then, like, in one moment, St. Peter's is being really physical, and then there's also that time where the guy tries to flop on Travion, and it was not called a foul on Travion; they called the flop. But just like the two ends of the straw, like they're being extremely physical, but then they're also flopping at times too. And I understand, like, that's why it's difficult for Travion and Zach, I'm sure, sometimes to play down low because they're a little bit uncertain. Okay, how much physicality can I deliver on my own end? Because I feel like I'm getting physical played, but then these guys are flopping. Like, I don't want to get an offensive foul. Like, I'm sure that's, I've never played in the post, but I'm sure that could be a tough toe to line or line to toe. So, yeah, that was unfortunate. I felt like that it was such a different officiated game compared to the Texas game. Obviously, we got rewarded a ton in the Texas game, and people could probably argue too much, but I felt like there was a lot of fouls in the Texas game and they called them. And then I felt like there certainly could have been more fouls called in the St. Peter's game that wasn't. That being said, I mean, it's a make or miss game and we couldn't make a shot. Like, and sometimes shooting is contagious. And unfortunately, our negative shooting seemed to be contagious in that game, as we just did not, in that second half in particular, just had a number of wide open shots that if we make one or two of those, it could either, it breaks the game open for us probably. It starts to put a lot more game pressure on St. Peter's. I mean, every time we got to a point where we could maybe, really put the pressure on them, they either hit a huge shot or we would miss an opportunity to take that lead from 4 to 6 or 4 to 7, or hit a 3 that would make it from 2 to 5 and really get, our crowd going, even though it wasn't much of a crowd, because it was, that was crazy. I mean, I knew it was going to be pro St. Peter's, but I wasn't quite sure it was going to be like that. Like, that was a straight road game, honestly.
Well, and the UNC fans really helped with that because there were more North Carolina fans than any fans there. And they were just, elated that they had the opportunity to potentially play a 15 seed, in the Elite 8 round. So that was a big part of it, where it was like that perfect storm. You're the first game, which has its advantages for warmups, but then you also have to deal with the other two teams' crowds rooting against you with the Cinderella story. You have all of America on TV rooting for you, but then you have everyone in the arena, it just made for a nervous environment. And we've seen it too many times this season, or maybe not too many times, but in the losses Purdue has had, it felt the exact same way. Raucous environment against you, whether it be Wisconsin or Michigan State or Michigan or at IU, and defense being extremely hounding. And so they're making all life difficult for you across the board. And then, of course, like you mentioned, shots weren't falling. And that was going to be my next point, and then I'll let Craig take it. But, that to me is one of the big, points to their season. And I think Dylan Sin from the, Journal Gazette, and I'll take something from his article he just wrote recently to this point, but he said, it starts with the shooting, Purdue began the season 8-0, beating eventual Final Four teams Villanova and North Carolina on back-to-back days at the Hall of Fame tip-off tournament, and adding a win over Iowa to ascend to the number one in those first 8 games. The Boilermakers hit 40% or better from three-point range 7 times, including a combined 20 for 46, 43% from three-point range against the Wildcats and Tar Heels. For the rest of the season, the Boilers hit 40% only 9 times in 29 games and not once in their last 11. Almost all of their best shooters cooled off from deep late in the season. All-American Jaden Ivey hit 43% before January 30th and 26% after. Sasha Stefanovic went 42% before January 30th, only 31% after. Mason Gillis went from 51% before January 30th to 33% after. He missed 2 tough ones with less than 9 minutes to go. That could have been some big shots. And Isaiah Thompson, who entered the transfer portal on Monday, made only 5 threes after January 30th compared with the 31 made threes before. Only Eric Hunter was left to pick up the slack, going from 39% before January 30th to 47% after.
Right.
Can you explain that? Is that the nerves of the game? Is that season fatigue? Is that is that a strategy that the teams playing you are now seeing on tape and working against you? Or is it something bigger than that? Is there cohesion in the offense, like knowing what each guy is going to do and not having that perfect symmetry like it felt like they had early on? Like, what? I'm just kind of pulling at straws here. How can you explain the drop-off from all those shooters with the exception of Eric Hunter, who, of course, then had 0 points in the last game? It's just like so unpredictable between all of them. How can you explain that?
I really can't. It's hard to. I certainly can't just point to one thing. It's probably a lot of things. Certainly, season fatigue or the grind of the Big Ten could certainly be used as an excuse or as an explanation. But that time of year, even though you're playing a lot of games, like the practices and all that sort of stuff are really light. They're not doing any sort of. They're getting those guys off their legs a lot that time of year. So you wouldn't think it would be too extreme from a tired leg standpoint. I think certainly from a defensive adjustment standpoint, teams very much so. A lot of teams tried to take away wide open rhythm threes for our guys and focus, allowed more of our post players to play one-on-one. Just maybe from an analytics standpoint, trying to, that 3-for-2 sort of thing and trying to take away wide open rhythm threes just because so many of our guys over the course of the season had that 40% or better 3-point percentage next to their name. So, staying home with shooters, not allowing as many just wide open rhythm threes certainly could have been part of it. But also just maybe water finding its level a little bit. I mean, we shot so well to start the year. Maybe some of those percentages were just bound to come back to earth a little bit. I don't have a great explanation. Obviously, when you start missing shots, it could hurt your confidence a little bit. You're maybe not stepping into them and shooting them quite the same way as you are when things are going well. So if you start missing a couple, and then if that happens for multiple guys, they all might start, instead of just shooting freely, thinking a little bit too much, and that could compound the issue. But I think it's probably a combination of not getting as many wide open, clean looks, and maybe just part of water finding its level to some degree. But they're definitely unfortunate, that in the St. Peter's game, you had so many guys go cold at the same time, because take, the turnovers, the pressuring defense, all that sort of stuff, like take all that out of it. Like if a couple guys are able to, hit a couple wide open shots, then you win the game, and then you move on to the next one. And then maybe that next one is when everybody gets hot and makes a bunch of shots and you beat North Carolina. So you just never know, but that's why it's all about survive in advance. Like you got to find a way to win games sometimes when you don't play your best. And that was what was unfortunate about St. Peter's, is that was a team Purdue was fully capable of beating without playing their best, and they just weren't able to make the plays down the stretch and throughout the course of the game to do that.
I think you're muted, Craig. He said, "God damn it."
I did not say that, Brad. My mother might watch this show. I did not say that. But Painter told us we were this team the entire year. Like, even when we were playing really, really good, he said the fact that we are killing it from three right now covers up all of these other mistakes. Like, he said that way back when. Like, when we were right before we got ranked number 1, he said, we're not that good, but we shoot so well right now, we cover up all those little flaws. And to me, you know, I kept bringing up too, Braggs, you saw it in some of my comments post-game on some of these games, like, yeah, you know, like we turned the ball over 14 times and we did this or we did that. But if we were shooting 40% from three still, we win this game. Like, the game's over. It's done. And it's, you know, I don't know. Is it a matter of why couldn't we shoot the way we were shooting in the first third of the season? Or is it a matter of we should have been doing those things better all the time? The thing that makes me laugh a little bit is, like, when we look back to that 18-19 season that everybody now sees as super rosy, even though all the fans across Purdue for most of that season were like, we're terrible, until we went on that run at the end of the season. I mean, the run at the end of that season was we were drilling threes left and right, you know? We just were doing it at a different point in time in that season. So,
and the Big Ten was somewhat down that year. They won the Big Ten, but I think it was with 6 losses.
Yeah.
Like they shared it with Wisconsin, I believe. Not to take your thunder here, but that they got to hang a banner for it, but it was, you know, if the Big Ten was playing as down as that season seemed, you know, they might have had a little more luck. So it's about timing. But go ahead, Craig.
What that team did do, though, was they certainly scratched out a number of wins over some maybe, you know, inferior teams, but scratched out some wins when, like, Carson had bad games.
Yep.
When the team shot poorly as a whole.
Yep.
That team, you know, with some defense and some intangibles and things like that, you know, guys like Grady and Ryan Klein really took care of the basketball. Nogel did a pretty good job taking care of the basketball. You know, that team was able to scratch out some wins where they didn't play their best, whereas this year's team, when they didn't shoot great, you know, maybe didn't do some of the other little things as well to help them scratch out some of those wins.
Yeah, I agree. They were definitely a little grittier defensively with no gel, but they also didn't have the target on their back like this season did. You know, where it was like their Super Bowl. You know, nobody stormed the court when they beat that team. You know, but they were storming the court this year because
this team definitely got everyone's best shot. It felt like more often.
Yeah. For sure. But it's funny to me now because for as many fans were like really critical of No Gel when he left and like that whole thing faded away. How much would fans have died for a No Gel this year?
Right. Well, that's what the recency bias comes in because it's
actually. Yeah.
What's that?
He would have complimented this roster fairly well, I think, actually. Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's the recency bias because if he, you know, when he left, a lot of fans were like, don't let the door hit you on the ass. And now they're like, we need a No Gel this year. You know, that's just kind of how it goes. You know, we do have a comment in the chat that's quite long from Derek Mulliken, but I'll try to read through it quickly. But he said, we lacked the element of being dynamic. We never press. We never run zone. The only dynamic thing is who will be well below their average. I get no zone, no press in the Big Ten, but why not have that as a catalyst come turning time? Gillis, most efficient player in college, shoots less than 3 times a game. Why? Give him 8 threes a game. Bobby, there's a lot there, but what are your comments to Derek there?
Yeah, unpack that all for us, Bobby, right now.
Well, I mean, part of why Mason is so efficient is because he, you know, is a low volume guy. I mean, he might be just as efficient with more volume, but you know, he's a guy who plays off of others. I mean, there's certainly times where he's open and the ball could be gotten to him and it's not passed to him for reason X, Y, or Z, and that's decision making. But he's going to, for the most part, get a low volume because he's not a guy who's a shot creator. He plays off of others. So, and unfortunately, Mason down the stretch, didn't shoot as well later in the year, as Greg pointed out,
which was shocking. Shocking.
I think it felt like he might have been struggling with some of his confidence a little bit late in the year. Just questioning himself a little bit. He seemed to pump fake a lot more later in the season, and sometimes it worked in his favor, and he was able to play off that pump fake and get in the lane and do some nice things, some mid-range jumpers and things like that. But it just felt like a lot of opportunities where he normally would just catch and shoot without any second thought, he was pump faking. I felt like as the games were coming down the stretch, which makes me think, as a guy who's a shooter, like if you're pump faking, that means you're questioning a little bit. So as far as the zone,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
As far as the zone and the press and all that stuff, I mean, those are obviously wrinkles and niche things that some teams do, and some teams have success with those, but other teams, don't. Like Iowa pressed this year on the road at Iowa, and Isaiah Thompson had 18 points because he's just getting wide open threes all game long. Like Isaiah obviously is a guy who can absolutely make you pay if you give him open threes. Outside of, Isaiah is not a big time shot creator for himself outside of that. And other teams have been able to slow him down at times this past year because he's not necessarily a guy who's going to be creating his own shot a lot. But a game like that fits him great because he's a big time shot maker. And if you're playing a press and you can break it, you're going to allow a team to get open shots. So, I mean, the press and stuff is like a slippery slope. And in some matchups against certain teams, it can be great.
What about the zone? I mean, we've heard Painter in the post-game presser this year, a reporter asked him about it, and then there was an article written about it, and Painter kind of took exception to the question, saying, nobody in the Big Ten zones, and you need to do, he told the reporter you kind of need to do your research if you're going to ask a question like that of why I don't run the zone. But, I'm no basketball savant. I'm just a fan in the stands, and people are telling me this team lacked defensive dynamics, to like the no-gel team or a different Big Ten teams this year like IU. Wouldn't a zone help these guys as opposed to trying to run man-to-man and getting pick and rolled and getting caught in jams with their big men kind of getting put at a disadvantage? Why is Painter steadfast against the zone if you were able to guess and speak for the program in that sense?
Right. Yeah, his philosophy, right or wrong, I obviously am a fan of Coach Painter's, and so I'm in agreement with his philosophy. But his philosophy is, I would like to just practice one defense and try to become elite at it, or as good as we can at that one defense, versus mixing defenses and not ever mastering one, just because he feels like good teams or great teams, when you're trying to win deep in the NCAA tournament or in the Big Ten Conference, good or great teams will expose you no matter what defense you're playing if you're not playing it well. So that's his philosophy as far as the man-to-man is. He thinks man-to-man defense over the course of time has been the main defense that's ever won the Big Ten. His first goal every year, first and foremost, is win the Big Ten, because if you win the Big Ten, you're going to give yourself a high seed in the NCAA tournament. And so he wants to be as successful as he can in the league, because that's what's going to give you the best shot in theory in the NCAA tournament by getting a high seed. So the man-to-man defense, elite man-to-man defense is what has won in the Big Ten over the course of time. And so he studied that and he said, okay, I'm going to go all in on man-to-man defense. Obviously, as you point out, Greg, sometimes your personnel, like this year's team, for instance, maybe at times could be suited to play a zone well. Who knows? Obviously, a guy like Zach, yeah, he would be great just to kind of stick down in the middle of a zone, and maybe he wouldn't have to move as much. But, those great zones, like the Syracuse zones, like those guys got athletes out of all those spots. Like they're able to cover, like if you're in the middle guy in the zone, like the Syracuse zone, there's times where you have to cover the corners. And I'm not sure Zacky's covering the corners in the zone. So, right. People who think the zone is just going to like strength 6, well, in theory, it could maybe work for a possession or two or whatever. Because you could stick me out there for a possession or two and they might miss over me. Like, who knows? Like, anything could happen for a possession or two, but Coach Painter's philosophy is I just want to try to be as good as we can at one thing. And this year's team, unfortunately, was just not a great defensive team as far as they just messed up assignments a lot, as far as just guys trying to, do things that they weren't as great at. And sometimes the game plan can be, a great game plan, but if the players aren't able to follow it all the time, then there can be breakdowns, and then it can look like it's not a successful strategy. That being said, I think Coach Painter is on the right track, and we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think Painter's as good as it gets. Real quick, one more thing I had a thought on. I don't want to lose my thought on it was, one thing that killed this team in a lot of ways, and I feel like could be a blueprint to beating Matt Painter's offense, which is very structured. They run a lot of different plays. They have sets that have like 9 different combinations within the one set, and I'm always very impressed by their offense because they run so many different plays, and their offensive efficiency was at an all-time high this year for most of the year. But when they played teams that pressed them full court, and maybe not a hardcore Iowa press, but maybe like a soft press that took 10 seconds off the clock before Purdue was able to get into their half court, which then cut off the shot clock from 30 to 20. Now you are running a set where you may get one shot at it. How does Purdue counter that? Because a few times in the St. Peter's game, that happened pretty much throughout the game. Jaden would get it across half court, and then they'd stop, and then they'd run their set because everyone's so freaked out because they're not getting easy buckets, and it's almost like you got to attack. But if Jaden's not making the right decisions in the first half, and they want everyone to get calmed down, but that style of press coming at you almost, baits you into playing faster. So what's the right answer to that? Because I feel like that is something that I would expect a lot of teams to continue to do. Matt Painter's offense isn't going to change no matter who the players are in a lot of ways. I know Jaden's a once in a generation type of player, but at the same time, Matt Painter's offense is relatively the same no matter who's in there. How does Purdue counteract that soft press, and get it across half court and still run an efficient offense?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely an effective strategy. That soft press, it burns that shot clock. It definitely puts an offense in a little bit of uncertainty regarding, okay, is this a full press? Are they going to trap? And so, yes, it's very effective as far as taking time off the shot clock, and especially for a team like Purdue who likes to run some set plays. That can be an effective strategy. But a lot of it also comes down to, the personnel too, as far as, if you got some guards who are really dynamic, and obviously Jaden is one of them, but if you have multiple guards who are really dynamic, they could still use a token press like that to their advantage and attack it a little bit more, just if they're more explosive and quicker and like to get into the teeth of the defense and create. This Purdue team just didn't have a whole lot of that. And so that type of strategy was even more beneficial against us because unless it was Jaden, there wasn't really any other guard on this team that had, elite burst or quickness to break people down off the dribble. And so those sorts of strategies were great because those guys, you could token press them all you wanted, and you didn't really have to fear of getting overexposed in the backcourt. And then all of a sudden the guy gets by you, and now you're drawn to kick out open three or lob at the rim. Like, you didn't have to worry about that unless Jaden had the ball in his hands. And I'm sure the guy who was guarding Jaden was giving ground even more to try to prevent that. And I'm sure we saw Jaden attack it at times and expose them. But hopefully maybe in the future, what would help Purdue at times facing something like that would be having more guards on the floor at the same time who are able to break down a defense off the bounce. And that's why I'm excited to see a guy like Braden Smith come into the fold next year. Hopefully a guy or two that we can get in the transfer portal potentially, just to have multiple guys who can make plays off the bounce for themselves and others certainly can help make the offense more dynamic.
What do you got, Craig? You're muted again, buddy.
No cussing.
That's two texts, two
That
technical
mute
fouls.
Hey, you got. I remember one show you did it twice too. So let's
true.
Sure,
get
that's
to
true.
me,
That's
okay?
true.
I've got lots of things. One, there was so much I wanted to comment in there, and I was like, do I jump in now? Do I don't? In regards to the zone thing, could we have run zone with JJ? Yeah. Could we have run zone with AJ? Yeah. We cannot run zone with Zach. We cannot run zone with Isaac. Like that. That's not. If you're going to run a really good zone like Syracuse runs, you don't have a Zach or a Isaac in the middle of that zone. Am I wrong, Bobby?
No, I agree with you. You need mobility in a zone. You need length and mobility in a zone.
Yeah. So I guess the other thing to your point, when you were talking about multiple guards that can break down off the dribble, one of the things that I've really thought about, and not just in regards to Purdue, but the Big Ten as a whole, right? If we look, like it's well documented, the Big Ten hasn't won a championship since 2000. Is that right? Right. And it's been well documented can you have the same team to win in March that you can have to win in the Big Ten regular season? Do those two things coincide with each other? And can you do that? And I mean, really, in the last 10 years, Bobby, the only offense that has been super successful in March has been John Beilein, Michigan teams, right?
I mean, Michigan State's made a couple Final Fours, I would say, in the last 10 years, right? Cassius got
one.
Is it just the one?
Have they made two?
Cassius got him there once, but maybe that's. Trice and Denzel got him to one.
Okay.
Well. Travis Trice.
And Wisconsin got
Wisconsin made two.
Was Draymond on one? Okay, gosh dang it, you guys just blew up my argument. Whatever.
I think if you're a great Big Ten team, you can be successful in March. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. Like, I think where you were kind of going maybe was, and I think this is legitimate. The Big Ten, I think, has definitely become much more of a big man conference.
Right. And can they defend other teams when they get to March with a traditional big man? Like, does a Big Ten system in general, whether you want to say that's the plays they run or everybody, my buddy Josh Douglas, who helps me run the page, is a high school basketball coach. And he said they all run the same plays. They just run them a different percentage of times or whatever, But like, can the Big Ten style of running 25, 30% post-ups and having the big man that can do that effectively and then flip that to defense when we get to March, when you're going up against ACC, Big East, SEC teams where 5 guys are switchable, 5 guys can break you down off the dribble, can that be successful? Like that's my big question, more so than a Purdue question, but just Big Ten in general. It seems like the style and the type of players that we have to be successful in the Big Ten just doesn't work in March by and large.
I think it's matchups. I mean, honestly, like I think this year Purdue matchup wise, like obviously that pressure and defense for St. Peter's bothered us. But I felt like, as it turned out, like if we would have played North Carolina, I think that would have been a great matchup for us as well. Like we played 4 straight. We would have played 4 straight teams if we played North Carolina that did not have centers that could shoot, and that to me was always a huge bugaboo for us. Is if we played mobile 5s who could pick and pop, and then you're getting beat on closeouts, you're giving up wide open threes, and things of that nature. And we would have ended up playing 4 teams that did not have centers that could shoot. So that to me, I think we would have got a huge benefit there from our matchups. I mean, we beat St. Peter's if we just have a couple less turnovers or make a couple open threes. Like take everything else out of it. Like we win that game 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10 probably if we just play a relatively normal offensive game for us. Holding them to 67 points was enough to win that game. And then I think North Carolina would have been a solid matchup for us defensively as well. Granted, they're playing really good basketball right now, but they once again don't have a center who can shoot. They weren't super deep. depth wise. So I think we could have
When
matched
you
up.
say this, it makes me so depressed.
Yeah, it's not exactly like it stinks for sure.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
No, and like I get all of what you're saying, Bobby, and I'm also like an NCAA tournament is not a good predictor of who the actual best team in college basketball is. It's all about matchups, all of that. But when you look at it from a 20-year period since we won our last national championship as a conference, like, can you just say that's a matchup thing? And one of the things that Painter does really, really well is, and like he speaks about this openly in podcasts or press conferences and whatnot, is like they find guys that do one thing really well. Sasha shooting threes. Zach Edey in the post scoring when he gets the ball deep, that type of thing. But when it seems like Purdue and other Big Ten teams, when we run into a team that can just disrupt offense, and you just need 5 guys that can ball out, right. and to take something from what St. Peter's coach was saying, when you do like those 5 New York, New Jersey dudes that are just ballers that can break somebody down and figure out a way to score in a street ball type of game, like I struggle sometimes.
That's why they say guard play wins in March, right?
What's that?
I mean, I think that's why they say guard play wins in March, because to me, great guard play can ad lib to any style a lot more freely. Like that Baylor team last year had 3 stud guards, like all 3 could shoot the 3, make a play off the bounce for themselves or others. That type of guard play can handle any sort of style. They can handle a press. They can play against the zone. They can handle a pressuring man-to-man. I mean, they can play against any style. They're very malleable because there's just so many good decision makers and scorers. What has certainly been, I think, a bugaboo for Purdue is, and it reared its ugly head this season, when we didn't have multiple guards playing well in games, we struggled. And obviously, Jaden did not have one of his best games. He made a number of good passes where guys make shots. His stat line looks a lot better. And
his second half, if you go back and kill yourself to watch it, his second half was much better than you realized, but guys just didn't knock down their shots when he found them.
So, but he was the only guy who could really, like North Carolina, RJ Davis and Caleb Love, both are, have been flawed players at times this season, but they're both very talented and can both make plays off the bounce and shoot the 3. And they're both playing at a high level right now. So that's why Ryan Klein and Carson Edwards, when they're both playing at a high level, was able to take Purdue to, an inch of the Final Four. So I think that's kind of been the one thing that Purdue has struggled with at times. Like my, senior year, we had Etwan Moore, but we didn't have like a second guard playing at a high level at that point in time offensively. Obviously,
was the second guard Lou Jack?
It'd have been like Lou, Kramer, Keaton Grant were all like the different other guards.
Okay.
At Purdue, this season for Purdue, when Purdue's got really good Eric Hunter play or really good Sasha play or really good Isaiah play to combine with, good Jaden play, who, brought it for the most part, game in, game out, Purdue was really tough to handle.
Yeah.
So I think you can be successful with a great big guy, but you got to combo that. Like Armando Bacot's a stud big, like he's playing good basketball as well, but he's been comboed with.
Yeah, but how much do they run just a straight post up for Barcott? I guess that's my thing. Like, to me, Barcott gets his points off of offensive rebounds and rim running, and does North Carolina run 30% of their plays as post ups?
No, yeah,
that's my question.
That is a great question, because that would be really curious to see what the post touches are for Carolina analytically.
Yeah.
Because, when you're trying to run through the post all the time, if you play a team like, St. Peter's, who's really pressuring, or a team like Indiana and Bloomington, where they're really pressuring and they have the crowd, and that pressuring style is really enabled by a crowd that's in your favor. It gives you adrenaline, enthusiasm. So that matchup wise didn't favor us. Like, it would have been better to play against a team that just sat back in the zone, if they had the fans behind them. But, it's tough to throw the ball in the post. It's tougher when you're being pushed out and pressured at 30 feet. It's tougher for the post guy to obviously get a good angle and get deep if he's being played physically. So Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's in today's basketball, it's playing through the post can be very successful at times, but it can also get the best of you against certain matchups. I
And
think.
how does a team like St. Peter's push Zach out? Like so many times as Zach caught the ball, it was 8-9 feet out. And I look at that team on paper and I'm like, dude, they're 6'6". Like,
Right.
how do you push Zach Edey out?
Right. And that's where I haven't watched the full game back to know was that Zach not being as physical as he should, or was that Zach having a poor game, or was that the officiating allowing them to be more physical than the Texas game, for instance?
Right.
I don't know that exact answer. It's probably some sort of combination, maybe.
It definitely is.
That.
And especially with Travion, I'm telling you, and I was texting with somebody during the game, they literally were putting their arms around Travion because Travion played the majority of the minutes. They were hugging him at his his waist before he caught it every single time. And it just drives me crazy because that's their mismatch. That's, when you're playing St. Peter's who doesn't have a big, that's where you go. You got to go. And people are like, oh, well, quit going down to the post. It's not working. That's the mismatch.
Right. If that game's called as close as Texas, we're probably living at the foul line and we win going away. But it wasn't. And so that's where, in March, you're going to get different officiating crews. You're going to that's where it would have been nice to obviously have another guard or two, step up for Purdue in a game like that where, the way it's being called, our guys are off a little bit. All right, time for our guards to make a couple plays. And it was just unfortunate that in that particular game.
And so Painter caught onto it at some point in the second half, and I could see him telling the refs, every time down after the offensive possession, hey, and kind of reminding them what they're doing to Travion. The one thing that I did notice, and I would like to move on before we, because I don't want to keep you on forever, Bobby, but I would like to ask about the future.
Let's keep him on. Let's keep him on.
Yeah, let's keep him on. The punishment time for Bobby.
I can go into depression even further.
Yeah. But here is one of my other things, and I love Matt Painter. Love him. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country.
No, I'm ready for this. Let's see what you got.
This is a stupid thing. And you know me, I can come up with some really stupid thoughts.
Is this about players chanting, sit down?
Nope. Nobody did that in this game, which was
fortunate. Yeah, that didn't cost us.
It happened in the Texas game,
players,
but luckily he sat down before the free throws. Anyway, when Shaheen Holloway's on the one sideline, Painter's on the other sideline, every time there was a no call or a call that went against St. Peter's or a no call that he thought Shaheen's just losing his mind. He's all crazy, in the refs. And Matt Painter's at a point where he's just very stoic. He just, and when a guy on Purdue makes a mistake, kind of just puts his head down. And, I know I've seen highlights of Matt Painter when he was younger. He was much more fiery. And to me, there is a human condition with these refs. And it's almost, and they don't want to be shown up on national TV. And this is something I went through with Derrick Rose too when he was in his MVP year. He was too cool to yell at the refs. He'd get hacked going to the rim. LeBron would barely get touched, and you'd think he'd gotten shot. And he would let everyone in the world know. And I'd be like, Derrick, I love you, and I appreciate that you're too cool to whine to the refs for fouls, but at some point, that's a part of the game. And Matt Painter is just so stoic, and Shaheen's on the other sideline, acting like, and I see this with Brad Underwood with Illinois. It happened at Illinois game. It was like everything was like a crime against humanity. Should Matt Painter get out of his calmness? I know you are who your coach is, so he's trying to put calmness into the team, but lose it on the refs a few times. Show them up on national TV. Let them know that this isn't acceptable. Is that something that Matt Painter should go back to, or am I just a fan that? I
mean, it's a slippery slope. I'd almost argue that crowds and the environments, in fact, impact the officials more than the actual coach does. And that, because that environment was super road environment for us. So I'd almost argue those officials get swayed more by that than the actual some coach yelling at them. But I mean, if you yell too much and you get a tech and then you lose by 2 points, that doesn't look great either.
We saw that with
like,
Brad Underwood as he got
Yeah.
thrown out in one game, but
Braggs, haven't you ever heard the saying you catch more flies with honey than vinegar?
I don't know, man. I would have been giving him the vinegar. And I'm watching Shaheen on the other side, and I get it. He's young, he's energetic, but like I just feel like that fuels it to an extent. But I'll let that go. That was one of my
Chris Beard was getting after the officials too, and they didn't get a single.
That's true. So it's not an end all be all. So we'll move on to the future of the Boilers. Surprising to me, at least, first news out of the transfer portal is that Isaiah Thompson, brother of PJ Thompson, who's an assistant coach and obviously a longtime great of Purdue Boilermaker basketball, and Isaiah, 3 years here as a junior, saying he's moving on. He's gonna seek other teams, other colleges for his senior season. When you take a step back and you think about it, I guess it can make sense to an extent. Try to find himself a place where he can get some legitimate starter minutes throughout the season and enjoy his last season of college basketball. But I was certainly not expecting this with Isaiah Thompson. And then we've had, everybody's waiting for what Brandon Newman is going to say. He put out a picture of himself high-fiving the fans at Mackey, and I think a lot of fans took that as he was staying, but we haven't heard an official announcement. What are your thoughts with Isaiah's announcement and just your overall maybe gut feelings, if you want to put those out there, or just your overall feelings with some turnover with the players that were here this year going into next year that would potentially leave or stay?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was certainly surprised by the Isaiah news as well. Obviously, just with his brother PJ being on staff, and Isaiah certainly seemed to like his time at Purdue. But I also can't necessarily blame him, and I'm not super surprised about the decision either. Just as far as I'm sure Coach Painter and that whole staff, PJ included, we're all transparent with Isaiah about where he stood in the program, and I'm sure Isaiah would like to have he's getting ready to become a senior. He's got a COVID year left as well if he wants, so he has 2 years eligibility left as an upperclassman if he wants. And I'm sure at this point of his career, he's looking to have a leading role in the backcourt wherever he plays, and I'm sure that the coaching staff probably relayed to him something along the lines of, "We like you, we'd love for you to stay, but we probably envision you being in a similar role to what you've been the last couple of years with us, which is a reserve complementary player." And at the Big Ten level, that is kind of what I see Isaiah as. So it makes sense to me for them to explain it that way if that's what they did. And I'm sure Isaiah thought about it, talked it over with his family, and with 2 years left of eligibility, I'm guessing he just decided, I would like to try to go somewhere where I'm going to get more of an opportunity to be a leading role. And I don't blame him one bit for that. And whether that's a mid-major school or another Division I school or high major school, I guess we'll find out. I would certainly think he's the type of guy that could go to a mid-major level and be a stud. So we'll find out what he does. But so from that standpoint, not super surprised as far as, kind of where he stood as an upperclassman with this program to see him want to try to, get a bigger role. And then with the rest of the guys, I mean, I expect everyone else to be back. I expect Brandon to be back. I think he's going to see lots of opportunity. 4 of the guards that played significant minutes this past year are now all going to be gone, assuming
has a chance to be a real leader on this team.
Yeah,
he's and Ethan.
Absolutely. I mean, him and Ethan, Mason, those guys have chances to have huge leadership roles and play significant minutes on this team next year. So I would expect everyone else to be back. And it's an interesting team. I like the freshmen coming in. I like everyone coming back, including the red shirts. There's talent on this roster, but there's certainly, lacking some stuff at the guard position, particularly guys who can, make plays off the bounce. Braden Smith coming in is one of those guys, and I think he's going to be someone the program loves. I think he's like a mixture of, Lewis Jackson, PJ Thompson, and Chris Kramer all like jumbled into one. Like, I think people are going to really like his game. Hard-nosed kid, and definitely can make plays for himself and for others off the bounce. We'll see how well he does it as a true freshman. but I think he'll be someone that plays minutes next year. I know Coach Painter loves him. And then the question now is there's 2 open scholarships, and I would expect Purdue to hit the portal pretty hard to fill certainly 1 and maybe 2 of those with some other guards who can potentially come in, particularly play those 1 and 2 positions, just because, at the 3 spot, Brandon and Ethan can certainly play that 3 spot effectively. Obviously, Ethan can play small ball 4 at times as well, and then both those guys can play the 2 as well. But those guys are more of a 2-3. In Purdue's world, I see those guys as more of like that 2-3. And I think Purdue definitely is in need of some additional guys who can play the 1, the 2 combo, true points or combo guards to come in and be able to, be playmakers.
Yeah, I
guess can I talk, Greg?
You absolutely can. Take it away.
I've got 2 major questions going into next season. One, when we look at TKR, Trey Kaufman-Renn, is he going to play backup minutes behind the 4, or is he going to be an oversized 3? Like, I saw some things when he was – you say 4? Okay. I saw some things when he was coming in that said he wanted to be a 3 from him when he was coming in. So that was my question there. But
the Painter always says every guy always thinks they're a number lower than they actually are.
But the big question to me, and I've gone back and forth on social media spaces with people about this, is we have, like right now, I do not see a guy, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, but right now, between who's on the team and the freshman coming in, I don't know who you give the ball to when there's 5 seconds left on the shot clock and say, go get your own shot. And to me, that's got to be filled from the transfer portal.
Agreed. 2 thumbs up on that response. I think Braden Smith might be a guy in time, and maybe as soon as next year. I mean, Lewis Jackson as a freshman made some real positive impacts on my team. My senior year was a guy who ended up starting a majority of those games that season as a true freshman. I think Braden, in theory, has a chance to do that. I don't know if he'll start from day 1 or not, but I think he's a good enough player from what I've seen that I think he's got a chance to make a pretty big impact from day 1. But yeah, I mean, obviously as a true freshman, Braden wouldn't necessarily be the guy you'd say right now until you see it at the highest level, just be a guy you're given to late shot clock. So I would agree with you. I would think those 2 open scholarships ideally are filled with 2 guys who are capable, certainly 1 at least, elite guy.
Don't you feel like that's why it's a very attractive place for a guard that can make their own play? I saw Xavier Pinson was one of the names that's out there, and I watched him play quite a few times at Simeon. He's as smooth as silk and a playmaker, and he did that on a loaded Simeon team with Talon Horton-Tucker. I don't know if he's looking to come back up to the Midwest playing down in LSU, but certainly would love to have him. I know they've already reached out to the Princeton guard.
Right.
What's his name?
And there's some Murray. I think there's some Murray State dudes out there that are that kind of guy too.
Yeah, that one stud from Murray State committed already to his former coach at LSU.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, Justice Hill, I think his name was.
Well, that asshole.
But don't you think that outside of that, don't you feel like this is a very attractive place for a premier guard because you got a bunch of role players ready to give the ball to somebody for heavy minutes?
No question. If you're an impactful guard in the portal, I would look at, and Purdue's talking to you, Purdue can be like, we literally want you to come in and fill the Carson Jaden role. Like that's literally what you're selling. And those
or Etuan, any of those 3, right?
Yeah. Any of those guys is what you're selling, and that's an attractive spot. Jaden's a lottery pick. Carson was an NBA draft pick. Etuan was an NBA draft pick. That's the spot you're selling to any potential portal option. And so obviously Purdue's got a lot of other great things about it as far as great conference, big time home atmosphere, all that sort of stuff. If I'm a guard who is looking to be able to come in and have the ball in my hands a lot and make plays at a high level for a big time top 25 level program, Purdue is on my short list.
What do you think about Toussaint there? Like I'm high on Toussaint in that point guard role of kind of being like a lockdown defender, dribble drive, point guard type of guy.
Well, the fact that you have 2 open scholarships now, if you only had 1, I would worry about a guy like that. Just I'm not sure he's a good enough score.
Yeah.
But with having two, I could certainly see a guy like Joe Toussaint. I mean, Joe Toussaint is basically Lewis Jackson, reincarnated. It's very
that was my exact thought in my mind too. Yep. He's Lou Jack.
He's Lou Jack 2.0. He's got a very similar skill set. Obviously, neither one of those guys is a great perimeter shooter. Toussaint can make one if you leave him completely open, but hard-nosed, like you said, good, tough defender, pushes the ball in transition, really forces the tempo, can break you down. A guy this roster certainly could use. And now you have two open scholarships.
I'm going to clip this video and send it to Toussaint tomorrow, FYI. So make your best sales pitch.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would think Joe Toussaint, Rob Finney, guys like that are defensive-minded, hard-nosed. Now that you have two open scholarships, I don't know if they want to come to Purdue or not, but I would think Purdue would certainly be enticed by a guy like that, and then you combo that with a guy who can really score.
Do you think Rob Finney would even be on Painter's radar, considering that he kind of spurned Purdue, or does he not hold any grudges in that regard? He's a West Lafayette kid. He goes to IU. He hits the shot on us this year at IU. Would Painter not be the type that holds grudges and all is welcome in that regard? And do you really think that Rob Finney is the kind of player that you'd want on the team?
If you have two, like he said, if you have two spots, Rob can be one of those two as long as you get a dynamic scorer in the other position. That's my thought.
You don't think it's no personal stuff from Painter?
The coaching staff, Rob's a great kid. He's a nice kid. I know the staff doesn't have any hard feelings towards Rob. Whether they're looking at him for their roster, I do not know. But, I mean, he would certainly be someone like Craig said. With the two open scholarships, their skill sets could be used on this team as a complementary piece. But I think first and foremost, I mean, let's be honest. First and foremost, you need a game changer at the guard position.
Yeah.
Is that Princeton guard? Because, I mean, this is someone they said that Painter highly recruited. It was like he had picked – it was down to Purdue or Princeton, and he picked Princeton. What's his name?
Dude, like 40 schools reached out to him in the first day, Braggs. That tells you everything you need to know. And
why wouldn't Purdue be at the front of that 40? As
they were. They did.
I'm just saying, why would Purdue 40 schools reach out to? Okay, you're saying because of his talent level. That's
I mean, like Kentucky reached out to him too. Like it's so not.
You're saying in regards to his talent level. Yeah, as far as
he's a talented scorer. I mean, he put up big numbers there. The one thing that he lacks a little bit, as far as just seeing some film on him, is he doesn't have great burst as far as getting by. That's that one thing. Purdue really needs more of, and obviously with Jaden leaving, you're losing a guy like that, is can you get by high-level defenders? Like, a lot of people can get by me off the bounce, but can you get by top-level defenders off the bounce? And that's why you need that next-level burst. Jaden had it, obviously. And you don't even have to, Jaden had next crazy-level burst. You just need, top
What was
end.
the name of the transfer they brought in a couple years ago that had a high points per game?
Yeah, Proctor. It's so hard.
It's a similar comp, probably a little bit as far as just doesn't have great burst like Proctor did.
Yeah, but it's really, really hard, right? Because you look at Octius, Hill, Proctor, right? Essentially, those three guys were. I mean, point guard or combo guard, whatever you want to say. And out of those three, arguably Proctor was probably the coming in before we saw him play was the best of those three. But really, in the end of the day, Octius, who might have been the lowest of those three coming in, was the most effective. Like, you don't know how they're going to
assimilate
and transfer those skills coming in. I think it's just it's a lot of guesswork. I mean, I think they know, but they don't know,
So, Bobby, to put you on the spot a little bit here, doesn't seem like it's something that has gained too much traction or anything like that. But would you be surprised if Zach Edey wasn't on the Purdue Boilermakers next year? You said you expect everyone to be back. There's obviously haven't heard any kind of announcements or anything like that. Most would assume he's coming back. And don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but would you be surprised if he wasn't on Purdue's team next year?
Right. At this point, I'd be surprised. I know he's said in some interviews that he's going to plan on like going through the process, and I presume that's what he's going to probably end up doing is putting his name in the draft and doing the workouts and getting feedback and all that sort of stuff. But just seeing his game now and seeing how the NBA is, and the NBA is not exactly thirsty for guys with his skill set. So I would presume that he will be back after he goes through that process and gets that feedback.
Wouldn't make much sense for him to go to Europe for a year, you know, because I did read one person make an interesting comment about, you know, guys that come from out of the States can't do NIL deals like Sasha did all year. You know, is there any of that plays into that?
I mean, it just depends what his priorities are, I suppose.
Selfishly, you know, I want the best for all these guys, and Zach's a great dude, and his mom is one of the nicest people on the planet personally that I've met. But yeah, selfishly, they'd be a very solid team if he were to come back. And I know Kofi's coming. I have no doubt Kofi's coming back. You know, some people.
You think Kofi's coming back?
Yeah, I do personally. But
really,
yeah, I do. That's my guess.
We need Kofi and Hunter and all these.
Are we gonna?
Hunter's coming back. Yeah, I think Kofi's coming back. I'd put money on it. So I just want, you know, obviously, I just want Edie there in general because he'd make this team he'd be one of the best big men in the country, and I want to see him put up 48 points in one of those early season games.
I mean, I think if Zach comes back, like I hope he does, and I think if you're able to get a dynamic guard in the portal, I think you could quickly turn this thing around next year to where you're a pretty dynamic team.
I agree.
Just
they won't have the pressure.
There's going to be a lot of turnover in the Big Ten, it feels like. I mean, hopefully if Kofi, Hunter, and some of these guys also leave, but there's just going to be, I mean, there's a lot of these guys who use their COVID eligibility, like a Brad Davis and Jordan Bohannon, who are obviously leaving now. There's a lot of guys who were fourth-year seniors, you know, like Travion Williams and Eric Hunter and Sasha, who were on their fourth year of eligibility, who have now left. So
you got the top 15 NBA guys leaving with Johnny Davis, Keegan Murray, and Jaden.
For sure. So there's just a lot of talent leaving the Big Ten.
And first rounder Brad Davison.
Yeah. Is Malachi Branham leaving Ohio State for the
He's gone, dude. He's gone.
He's gone?
They haven't announced it
He's
yet.
a top 15 pick from everything I've seen.
Blake Wesley from Notre Dame said he's leaving. I saw that today.
Wait, who said?
Blake Wesley is going to the draft from Notre Dame.
Like committed 100%.
Yeah, he announced it. Yeah, he put a whole thing up.
He's first rounder projected by a lot of.
He was a dude that like I really wanted Purdue to land when that came up, and I know we might not have the spots, but I wanted that.
He would have been. You know, he would have been interesting, obviously, to like pair with Jaden. That would have given you that second guard who obviously could beat people off the bounce that we lacked. But both of those guys' decisions at times, that would have been a interesting puzzle to put together.
Oh, for sure.
Do you see any red shirt candidates? You know, this William Berg to me is the wild card. You know, you think he's a red shirt candidate?
If Zach's back, I do. I mean,
yeah, that would make sense.
Caleb would play all the 5 minutes that there was to offer at that point.
Right, because they've had so many talented. Brandon Newman's redshirted, Sasha redshirted did wonders for them. So, because I see William Berg highlights and they're all in a gym by himself, and I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm excited to see you. And I actually sat next to him at the Iowa home game, and you know, he looks big. You know, he is big. You know, and all that, but. You know, 7'3" can shoot whatever. I think he's 7'3", right? And he can shoot and drive and stuff. That'd be great if he could be ready right away. But I agree with you. You're predicting a red shirt. I think that could definitely be it. Another guy.
I think it's a complete crapshoot, right? Because like when you watch tape on him of actually playing other teams, like the dude's 7'2" and he's playing a bunch of 6'5" guys.
Right.
So like you don't know
if that
if he comes in like, dude, his 3-point shot looks pure. I'm not gonna say like Dirk Nowitzki pure, but it looks pure. Like that stroke looks sweet, and we don't know. Maybe he comes in and they're like, "Oh dang,
Yeah, maybe if he's
they
Hunter
didn't-
Dickinson, like if he comes in, he's Hunter Dickinson last
Right.
year, and he's like picking, popping, making threes.
I think he's a little more fluid than Hunter.
We
you
didn't
know.
think, oh, stop that, Bragg. Stop.
Hunter can shoot, but he just kind of lumbers up and down the court.
He lumbers, but he's a good passer and stuff too. He's
Yeah,
pretty skilled,
that's what I meant. I'm not saying Hunter doesn't have skill. I'm just saying it just looks a little more fluid.
But they didn't think Zach was going to come on like he did either. So, but he could be Matt Tindam also, right?
And Zach would have been redshirted had Matt Harms not left too.
Likely.
Likely. So one of the highlights, though, I was laughing because I could have sworn he was playing in a gym that was carpet. It was carpet. It was all carpet. Like it wasn't a basketball floor either. So I don't know what to expect from the guy. I'm excited to see him, and I have no doubt that Purdue's going to develop him because that is what Purdue does best. They recruit, and then they don't just recruit good players. They develop those players when they get here. A final guy that I'm excited about, Fletcher Lawyer, obviously a shooter. I think people know enough about him. He just won the 3-point contest for high schoolers down in New Orleans. Sasha actually is going to be in the 3-point contest tomorrow night. Bittersweet being down in New Orleans, but make sure you tune into ESPN tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Why did they make him look like a werewolf in that?
Because he is a werewolf. I don't know. all the stabs and bullets he's taken, he's got to be a werewolf. A Wolverine recover from all them beatings he's taken on social media. But I know he doesn't read all that, but I do, unfortunately. The one guy that I do question about or wonder about, and Sasha talked about him when he came on our show to start the year. When I asked him who impressed him the most last offseason, Brian Waddell.
Yeah.
And he was injured. He had surgery or something to start the year on his foot, I believe. It's been a while. It feels like 2 years ago. But, what kind of impact do you think he could make? Because I think he's kind of a sleeper in all this and kind of like that Purdue player. Is that a good gut instinct on what we should expect from Brian, or wait and see because he's still young?
Well, the wait and see thing for me would be one, he's young, but also he's coming off a serious knee injury.
Big time,
unfortunately for him, where he tore his ACL earlier this year. But I mean, that's why I think because of Brian Waddell and how talented he was this preseason and how impressive he was, along with Ethan and Brandon and Trey Kaufman-Renn and all these guys who can play the 3 and 4 position. That's why I do think the other freshman, Camden Heide, who's coming in, I would, kind of expect him to maybe end up redshirting based on kind of the logjam at his position. That being said, once again, if he's so good where he's not redshirting, that's a great problem to have for Purdue because that means he's Franz Wagner or something from day one. But I think, Brian, I think is going to certainly make an impact next year, assuming health-wise, because he was a guy that the coaching staff was raving about, and Sasha raved about him as well as a guy who can shoot the 3. Coach Vander really likes his defense, which is something that certainly this year's team could have used an extra defender on it. So if you can guard, if you take care of the basketball,
I liked his length. Just watching him in the scrimmages, he just seems like a guy that can be a real disruptor.
Brian's a 3, right? Or is he a 4?
He's a 3. He's probably a 3, but a guy who certainly, like Ethan, could play a small ball for. I'm guessing.
I think this all gets super confusing because I'm like, well, if Trey plays 3 minutes, I know you said 4, but I'm saying if Trey shifts up, then you've got Hyde behind first at the 4, right? Or no, we've got Gillis.
Mason. And
Trey,
it's
hard to play that out because his first playing backup 5 is Gillis playing 4. Where Hyde's a 4, but where does Waddell fit? I think it's TKR. Trying to figure out where they all fit. I think it's really hard to figure out who might redshirt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think Mason and Trey are going to play the 4, and I think Zach and Caleb are going to play the 5. Caleb. Had some nice moments at the 4 this season, but his most effectiveness in time will come at the 5. He's going to be a matchup nightmare at the 5, a guy who can pick and pop, a guy who can rip closeouts. I see him as hopefully what I see his potential being is like a left-handed Mo Wagner type. maybe not quite as skilled as Mo was on the block. Mo could scored a little bit on the block, but maybe Caleb can just develop a little lefty baby hook or something. But he's that skilled and that good of a shooter. You put the ball on the floor a little bit. If he's got big, if he's got a Kofi Coburn trying to close out on him, that'd be the type of guy he might be able to rip and go and get past. And so I just think that's Caleb's ultimate position is the 5, and then that would allow Mason and TKR to play the 4.
I saw a great tweet the other day that said, I hate to tell you Purdue fans, but 6'10", 275 is not a small ball 5 in college. Because people were talking about Caleb as being a small ball 5, and they were like, I hate to tell you Purdue fans who are spoiled with 7'2", but Caleb is not a small ball 5.
No, you're right. That's a good point. I mean, that's Juwan. That's a Juwan was 6'10", and that's.
Do you think Caleb needs to get more muscle? Can he get more muscle? Because like when I watched him in high school, I'm like, this dude's country strong. He was throwing it down. He won a state title as a sophomore, and then I think again as a senior at Blackhawk Academy or whatever in Fort Wayne. But then when he gets to the college level, at first, no pun intended, but he played really well to start the year and, had some nice cuts to the basket and dunks and hits a big 3 in the corner against Villanova to seal it. But he, compared to Zach Edey, anyone looks small, but then he just kind of seemed undersized in the times that he did try to post up and get down low. It's not as easy as it was for him in high school. Can he put on more muscle to get himself better positioning towards the rim on those post-ups that he's going to see a lot more of now going forward?
No question. I mean, that's his transition to playing more 5 works out well at this point because he gets another year to be in a college weight room and continue to grow and mature physically. So there's no doubt that will help him play that 5 position because, yes, the 5 is that much more of a physical, you need that much more physicality to play the 5 and the 4 typically. So that will help him having another year.
Especially in the Big Ten. And then final one, and then if you had anything final for Bobby, Craig, go ahead. But my final question, I know we're looking at transfers for point guard and dynamic guard play, but I'm like as big a fan as Ethan Morton as the Ethan Morton Truther account, on Twitter, who's certainly very funny, but he really emerged at the end of the year, especially defensively in the Texas game. Played a lot of different positions, kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Played the 4 when they needed him against athletic 4s, Ron Harper Jr., whoever. But he came into Purdue as a all-time great point guard out of Pennsylvania. Won Mr. Basketball. First top 50 out-of-state recruit for Purdue men's basketball. I asked him at senior day, with all the festivities afterwards, had a chance to speak with him, and I asked him, would you want to go back and play? Or is your goal to be a point guard for this team? And, he gave the company line, whatever the coaches asked me to do. And I tried to press him a little harder, and it seemed like, point guard's still in his blood, so to speak, but he said he's just spent the last 2 years so much trying to learn his responsibility of catch and shoot and the opportunities that were coming to him in that moment because he's not that player anymore. Do you envision with that opening now, depending on who they can get in a transfer, can Ethan Morton become the point guard for Purdue men's basketball for the next couple of years? Is he capable of that, or are they going to leave him on the wing and let him do what he's learned to do here these first 2 years?
Sure. No, it's a good question because, like you said, he was kind of recruited or touted as a point guard coming out of high school, super great high school career in Pennsylvania. I think what Purdue's looking for at that point guard position, just because of what that position entails at Purdue, which defensively usually entails jamming the basketball full court, jamming the other team's point guard, and then, of course, on the offensive end, pushing the basketball in transition, speed, getting in the teeth of the defense. I'm not sure Ethan doesn't possess, that elite speed with the ball offensively or, elite foot speed defensively as far as picking up full court. So I don't think he's ever going to be put in that number one guard position. If he's out there with the Joe Toussaint, Joe Toussaint would be doing some of those responsibilities. And that doesn't mean Ethan can't still be a big time decision maker in the half court. But I just don't think you're ever going to see, a bunch of guys out there who aren't great ball handlers. And then Ethan as the one who's getting the outlet every time and pushing and then guarding the other team's point guard full court, because that's what the point guard position entails at Purdue. And I just don't think that's
more of a Sasha guy.
I think he's more of a Sasha, Dakota, Ryan Klein, that type of like wing decision maker.
Get it into the big from the elbow.
Yeah, he's probably, the Dakota comp is probably the closest thing for him as far as big time wing defender, because I think he does have a chance to be a really big time wing defender. I mean, some of the plays he was making in that Texas game were some high level stuff defensively. I think he can be that type of great wing defender. And on the offensive end, really good decision maker, passer. He's never going to be quite the shooter Dakota was as far as on the move. But I think as far as a big time catch and shoot guy, he obviously proved that in a small sample size this year, he can be that. And then I think he obviously can put the ball on the floor. I think he's going to be a guy who's really going to be able to start being able to put the ball on the floor and beating closeouts. And then hopefully, I'm hoping even by the time he's like a senior, junior, senior, he might even be able to become one of those like get a little Paul Mulcahy in his game, where maybe he's able to kind of back down, use his size, and be a little bit more savvy from that standpoint as a player in time. But I think next year's team, I think his role as a big time spot up shooter, great decision maker, make plays off closeouts, and then be a high level wing defender, intelligent, IQ, all that stuff. I think he'll have a lot of minutes on next year's team in that role.
Any final thoughts, Craig, for Bobby before we let him go to bed and torture session season 2022 is complete?
No, I just think maybe his best comparison with Ethan was Paul Mulcahy. Like, I know we always like to comp people to like who we know, but I don't know that Purdue's had a true dude that we can compare to Ethan. Like when you try to think about what his game could be and what his game is, I don't know that there's a really close comparison in the last few years that we can say that's who Ethan is compared to a Purdue guy. So that's why I appreciate that Paul Mulcahy example. I think that's probably his closest comparison. I think he can be really, really valuable going forward, but I don't know for Purdue fans. I don't know that it's, we're going to be able to draw that direct comparison to somebody. But hey, Bobby, it's been great doing this all season. The only real question that I have for you is, like, now that we've gone through the entire season, have you decided that Braggs is a stalker or a friend?
He does have an amazing way of finding me at all these different locations.
You know what? I should have loaded the video of you when you guys are getting off the bus. I get a press pass. I'm trying to be serious. I'm trying
not to
rub it in,
Brad. Don't rub it in. I couldn't be there.
Trying not to embarrass Sasha. Trying to be serious. You guys are getting off the bus. I'm the only media guy out there doing my thing, getting the sweet shot. And then, of course, Bobby's like giggling and throwing up the deuce. I'm like, this is my serious video, It's like, come on. You're killing me. But yes, I have been stalking you this year. Typically it's not hard to find you. You're on press row where I'm always trying to sneak my way to.
Hold on.
Maybe I'll sneak
the next time. You promised the next time we talk to Bobby, you were going to ask him about Mad Mushrooms.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I mean, maybe
there's not enough. We're at time limit, I think.
I figured we should have started that with that. I meant to start the show with your thoughts on the Will Smith slap too, to keep things light, but if there was any player back when you played that you wish you could have Will Smith slapped, who would that be?
So all of our listeners are going to have to wait until next year to hear about the Robbie Hummel and
it's a good tease. It's a good tease. Mushroom. It's a good tease for the preseason show next year. Yeah,
we'll bring it up. Maybe when we get Painter on, we'll have you come on and you can tell the.
I don't know any details about that.
Well, again, and I echo Craig's sentiments. It has been a lot of fun. Again, second year now having you on. Come on, quite frequently, and obviously I've said this before, but it means a lot to us, and definitely appreciate your friendship and your help on the show. And obviously we're going to continue to do this and bring on different guys and have you chop it up with Robbie and whoever else we can bring on. But I look forward to going to a Cubs game with you sometime this summer if we can get you from your busy life and your work and everything else, and I'm sure we can work that out. But thank you again. It didn't end the way we wanted, but it's been a fun 5 years, and now we get to move on to post Sasha career for me as a Purdue fan, and it will be much different, obviously personal, for me in a lot of ways. So maybe now it can be a little easier with the coverage and the way I talk about this team. But I'll always be a positive fan first because that's who I am. I'm a Cub fan. That Chicago sports fans are positive by nature and to a fault in a lot of ways. So that's no different with Purdue basketball. So Bobby, thank you again for everything, and we look forward to crossing paths with you here soon, and maybe sometime at Wrigley Field this summer.
Yeah, and I want to thank you as well, and I appreciate all the times that you told me that you agreed with me way more than you agreed with Braggs on my takes.
Well, that's not hard. My takes are terrible.
And I still do have the screen. I still do have the screenshot of when you messaged me and were like, Craig, I think we finally disagreed for the first time.
I know we agreed like literally for the first 3 months on everything, and then we finally had a disagreement or two late. But yeah, me and you are pretty similar Boiler fans, I think. And yeah, it's been fun chatting with you guys all year. And yeah, it didn't end the way we wanted, but still, like Craig said earlier, still a really fun season, still a lot of memorable moments. I'm going to really enjoy seeing Jaden go in the top 5 or wherever he goes. That'll be a fun moment.
Will it be a good thing for Jaden, or should he hope to avoid the Indiana Pacers, or would that be a good thing for him?
Go Pacers.
I think he would love it. It'd be fun. Certainly.
Oh, because his mom played there, right?
Yeah. He called Gainbridge like one of his home away from homes, essentially. So that'd be cool for him.
All right. Well, we'll always have this moment.
We'll always have Zoom.
We'll always have, what do they call that? Steel.
Blue steel.
I thought that was a 14-year-old high school reporter.
Yeah, blue steel. Nice ass painter. No. All right, Bobby. We'll let you loose. We'll let you to bed. Thank you again for everything. We'll see you here real soon. I'll talk to you later.
See you guys
later. That is Bobby Riddell, aka Bobby Buckets, doing his thing for Purdue men's basketball radio. We forgot to ask him what his second year was like doing that because he's talking about the team. That's okay. I don't think he could take any more. It's a depressing conversation, but we got to the good stuff where we talk about next year. I thought about reaching out to a few players. I thought about reaching out to maybe.
I don't know that it's the time.
Right. And I just want to give them their space. Yeah. Sasha's down in New Orleans getting ready for the 3-point contest tomorrow, so I didn't want to bug him.
Yeah,
I thought about maybe Trey Kaufman-Renn. I thought he would have been a good one, just being a guy that sat on the sidelines and watched, but yeah, as hard as we're all taking it, I think obviously the players are taking it much harder and want to give them their space. I thought Julia Edie, who's very active on Twitter, Zach Edie's mom, obviously.
She's awesome.
She is awesome if you ever get a chance to meet her in person at the games. But she's also very funny and lighthearted on Twitter, and that's exactly the same type of person she is in real life. She tweeted this after the game, and I thought it was very profound. She goes, "Thoughts after an 11-hour drive. No one bleeds like the athlete. No one aches like their families. No one cares like the coaches. No one can be disappointed like the fans. But the family is never disappointed, only proud." And just reading that put chills down my back because it is very true. When people were giving me shit when Purdue lost, and I know a lot of people, at least friends of mine, were thinking about me when Purdue lost. And I'm sure it's the same way with you, Craig, because I'm sure a lot of people know you as a diehard Purdue Boilermaker fan. So, aside from the team, they think about that particular fan in their circle. And, some thought I'd be crushed, when they lost. And it certainly was disappointing. As, Zach Edey's mom said, no one's disappointed like the fan. But, just having watched Sasha and had this friendship with him over the last 10 years from Crown Point High School to making it all the way to Purdue and seeing the career he carved out there, I was proud, even when it was over. Yeah, it sucks. It's St. Peter's. Obviously fans will always look at this season with some sort of disappointment because they fell short on a few different levels. But for me personally, I just had to take a step back and appreciate how far he came personally and the team in general, because, it wasn't just Sasha's success I was rooting for. It was the team's success. So you start to get invested in the other players in that way. And they busted their ass. And for a team that reached some levels that no Purdue team has ever reached, and for most fans to say that's not good enough, while as hard and cold as that may seem, when you take a step back, just like all the court stormings you saw this year, it's a sign of respect in a lot of ways. And even over the disrespect, if you pull the covers over the, beyond the disrespect, it's actually respect for a team, because the fans have higher expectations now, instead of just being like, well, that's as good as you'll ever be. That's not how they felt. They felt you could have won it all. And that, to me, is showing a new sign of respect for the Purdue Boilermakers that maybe former teams have never had before, is this high of expectations. The expectations will drop next year. The losses won't feel as earth-shattering, soul-crushing, and maybe some fans need that. But, sign me up for the pressure cooker seasons like this season was, because that's what it's all about, because that's when you're close. Yeah, the losses hurt, but that's, I always go back to enjoy the journey is more fun than the destination if you let it. And when you get to that destination, it's going to be no different than this season. You're going to have trials and tribulations. It's going to take 10 years off your life with all the stressful moments and barely getting over the hump. But if you can just appreciate the journey, by the time you get to the destination of winning a Final Four or getting to a Final Four or winning a national championship, once you win the national championship, it's just relief. I can just speak to this as a Cub fan. When they won, I wasn't crying tears of joy like I thought they were. I thought I was going to. I was relieved that they didn't blow it. I was like, thank God, this tormented franchise that I've loved and poured my heart and soul into my whole life, they didn't blow it. They're not going to be the butt of the joke anymore. Right. And that's a weird feeling, but that's the feeling you have when you're not the Yankees, when you're not the New England Patriots, and you're a team that's striving for that one. Right. And I have no doubt that that's how it's going to feel for Purdue fans when the Boilermakers finally win it. So just enjoy the journey, appreciate the journey, let it happen, and when it does, then you'll feel relieved. That's about as good a sentiment as I can give to it.
Well, and the best comp that we have, like if we want to look at another team out there that is similar to us, it's the team that gives us so much pain because of what happened 3 years ago, right? Like, I mean, Virginia is our best comparison of like, we're not Duke, we're not North Carolina. So in the Big Ten, we're not IU, we're not Michigan State, but we're a really good team year in, year out. And we play really fundamental basketball most of the time. And you just have to have all those things lay out perfect for you to reach the pinnacle of it. But with that said, that Virginia team also did have 3 NBA draft picks that year. So like you have to have talent and you have to have the breaks work out for you. They shouldn't have won the game against us, but they did. And that managed to go through to the end. Like, I think that's our best comparison. Coach-wise, Tony Bennett doing things right.
Right.
Fundamental basketball, us doing things right. Not a bunch of one-and-done players. I think we're really similar to Virginia. And I think it's really possible that we have that moment sometime in the next 5 or 6 years. But
Villanova too. Villanova,
We're not Duke. We're not North Carolina. I don't think we're Villanova, because Villanova is the class of the Big East without a question. Like they are the team in the Big East. And we're not some of those other teams, and we never are going to be. And if you listen to Purdue fans, supposedly they don't want us to be, because they don't, quote, want one and done player talent. I don't know what the fuck that means, but I'm sorry that I just dropped your F-bomb on this. But I don't know what that means. And I don't understand exactly why they can't live through a mistake here or there for one and done type of capability in a game. But that's not who we are. And we're on that Virginia path. And I think we can get to the pinnacle, but it's going to take time. And it probably only happens once in 20 years, if we're going to be honest. But my brother was a high school basketball coach. My brother played ball overseas some, and he looks at this, and he's very much a believer that Painter makes this team better than they actually are every year. And he makes us more relevant than Purdue would be every year based upon the talent. And I subscribe to that for the most part, that we aren't a blue blood, and Painter figures out a way to maximize the talent that we can get on a year-end basis most of the time. The only big question I have, and Painter has shown that he can adapt offenses, and strikingly enough, maybe some of his best offenses with that Carson Edwards year, and when Jawan had to play center when he's not a true center, and some of those years, some of our best years is when he's not had the big man that he wanted. And I'm curious how he adapts going forward. And I'm hoping with a William Berg type dude that's a pick and pop 3 center, maybe he adapts again and we change what our offense looks like and can maybe get over that peak.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's definitely a wild card in all of this and how he can develop. And I think the other thing too is, like I was talking to my good buddy Eric, a Purdue grad, diehard Purdue basketball fan. This team benefited from a freshman, now sophomore class that came on like a hurricane, right? And
yeah,
no one expected, except for Craig, who has the receipts of saying Jaden Ivey was going to be a big time player.
I said it before he came to Purdue, just for the record.
But for the most part, I don't think anybody realized he was going to be gone after his sophomore year.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody realized Zach Edey would become the player he's become in his sophomore year. But at the end of the day, they're still sophomores. And when they got to St. Peter's, you saw some of that, the experience. You need experience. And did they mature as fast as we needed them to as Purdue fans? No, they're still great players. They still did a lot of great things for Purdue, but just imagine if they were both seniors, how good they would be. I mean, Carson Edwards goes off.
Yeah.
Right. Carson Edwards goes off, and that's a team that will always be remembered for greatness, winning a Big Ten title, regular season title, and getting to an Elite Eight, inches from a Final Four, closest they've been since 1980. But he was a junior. And with another year,
Drags, people look back on that year with rose-colored glasses, and I bring this up all the time. The last 8 games going into the NCAA tournament, Carson Edwards had over 4 turnovers in half of those games.
Right.
He shot less than 30% in half of those games.
Right.
But he got hot in the right 2 games. And, we've talked about this before. I don't believe in clutch. If you look at Kobe, LeBron, whatever NBA player, Jordan, any of those NBA players, their percentages aren't any higher in, quote, clutch games than they are in regular season games. It just it trends to happen at the right time sometimes. And I don't believe in clutch. And Carson got hot at the right time. So now we all look back and say, oh, he was a beast all the time. No, he got hot for 3 games. Like,
right.
The dude set the
He's
tournament
still a
record
great player,
threes.
but
he's my favorite player of all time, Brad.
Right,
He's
but not
not
infallible. Right.
My favorite Purdue player of all time, but he got hot at the right time. If you look at the 8 games before those 3 games, over 4 turnovers, half of those games, less than 30%, half of those games.
Yeah. The Matt Harms tip-in against IU at the final possession.
Legend for us.
I think Carson Edwards went like 0 for 23 in that game.
I think it was 1 for 16. But
yeah,
close,
it was bad. And I can remember driving home and fans saying, bench him and all this stuff. And that's what happens, and getting hot at the right time is part of the game. And this team got hot against Texas. You were hoping it'd carry over. I mean, to hear Bobby talk about, the little things that just a few things they should have beaten St. Peter's, even not playing their best basketball. It's crushing, especially when he says, how well they matched up with North Carolina. It's like, God dang it, I would have loved to have seen it. But I do think some fans get ahead of themselves just assuming like, they blew their Final Four. Well, they would have had to beat North Carolina too. But when you hear Bobby talk about how good of a matchup it would have been and to consider maybe then the top finally comes off the rim for Eric and Mason Gillis and Sasha and Isaiah and Ethan and all the guys that are taking the threes out there.
And the one thing we haven't talked about yet is all the other things we talked about. There were 3 dumbass fouls down the stretch.
Yeah.
Mason Gillis diving on a ball with 2 seconds left in the shot clock. Yeah. Somebody fouling a 3-point shooter. I'm not going to bring that name up. And
our boy who's going to literally think about that the rest of his life.
And there were 3 fouls in those last 5 minutes. Even as bad as we played, like if we just don't make those dumb fouls, we maybe still win that game. Like, there was so much that just rolled against us that night.
And sitting in the press conference media room, and having the pleasure of covering that game for Indiana Sports Coverage, Purdue, and our guy Dave Kovich.
Okay, rub it in again, Braggs. Rub it in again.
Yeah, I know, but I do want to thank him for that opportunity on the show live. I already did it personally, but it was a tremendous opportunity and a very cool experience. But sitting in the press conference and hearing Painter bring up those fouls and talking about Purdue beating Purdue once again, and that was kind of the common theme in all their losses. It wasn't necessarily the other team beating Purdue; it was Purdue beating Purdue, and it is very frustrating and disappointing. It was the turnovers for most of the year. Painter harped on that, and then for a lot of the year, it was also the defense not being up to snuff. And then Purdue beats Purdue on bad fouls. That came out of nowhere. Like that wasn't necessarily something that was a part of the formula of their losses in the previous game. So it was just brutal, up 4 into foul eater, coming around the curl for Sash. I know that he'll think about that the rest of his life. And that's why for me, it was like, I'm upset about the loss. But I'm more upset for him, and I'm more upset for Travion, and I'm more upset for Eric, and I'm in the team, certainly the seniors, but the team in general, because just being up close to them, I know how much this means to them, and for fans to act like it, I don't know if any do, but any fan that thinks it means more to them is crazy.
They're full of shit. Just say it how it is. For any fan out there that's acting like this is some
I get it. Fans are for life.
Travesty.
Fans are for life. You're a fan for 40, 50 years. These guys are here for 4 years, and they go. But you know what? These moments will stick with them personally forever too. They may not have been a fan of Purdue for the last 50 years like you have. So I'm not trying to rank who it's more disappointing for. Obviously, the players put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and the fans put their hopes and dreams and their money to get to these games. I know some fans that are friendly to what we do here spent a couple grand to go to that game. That's nothing to snuff your nose at, but these guys.
Rose-colored glasses. The fact that I got COVID that week, I saved like $1,000, but
it's always the silver linings you got to find, and that's it, But I shared it on Twitter, and I'll share it here on the show. I got an early flight home Saturday morning. I was supposed to leave Monday morning, and I ended up leaving Saturday morning to get back to my family, let my little girl cheer me up. But on the flight home, I wake up to a guy having a heart attack, and
that was
literally
crazy.
Was dead for 20 minutes, and they were resuscitating him, and a lot of nervousness on the plane, people screaming, and a scary scene. They pull out the defibrillator. They revive this guy back to life after about 20 minutes of working on him. Thank God there was a doctor and 2 nurses on the plane. And I don't need someone dying to give me perspective on it's just a game.
But it does give you perspective.
But it does. It's impossible not to, especially when you're on your flight home from the game. And, it's a constant reminder that, life is short, and just appreciate things. Don't be upset about what you don't have. Appreciate what you do have. And this team has given us a lot. Did they give us enough for all the fans? Maybe not, but they certainly gave us a lot of experiences and moments that we can live with forever and appreciate. And I'm sure we'll be able to appreciate them more as the years to come. I know I appreciate them right now, but maybe for some other fans, it'll take a little more time. But, that's it. We move on to the next year, and hopefully we can, coerce Ethan or somebody that we can get for who I'm going to harass now. Now that Sasha's gone, I think Ethan's my target because I like Ethan. He's a smart kid. He's smart young man, and I think he's just talking to him. I enjoyed his personality, and I like what he brings to the team. So maybe we can coerce him to come on the show a few times next year.
Well, I think for some summertime stuff, we should probably reach out to like Willie and
William Berg.
Willie Berg.
Yeah. Willie.
And,
we're already calling him Willie.
I'm already calling him Willie. Willie.
Big Willie
and Hyde and Lawyer and the other kid Smith, right?
Braden Smith. Yeah. I absolutely
like maybe we can get them to before they're actually officially at Purdue. Maybe we can get them on for a show just to have casual conversation about themselves and their game and that type of stuff and what they think they're bringing to Purdue. I think that'd be interesting to Purdue fans.
Boilers of the future. I'm totally down for that, and we can, excuse me, extend some olive branches and see if they want to come in while they're working through their summer, because they're going to start joining the team now. Here shortly in a couple months or whenever high school lets up, they go right to it. So. We'll reach out and see if we can do some Boiler of the Future shows. I'd absolutely love to do that just to bridge us to October. It's going to be a long 7 months until that open scrimmage at Mackey Arena, which I know me and Craig will be front and center for, and we will continue to bring you great coverage. Maybe we can trick Matt Painter into coming on. That's my goal of this offseason.
Dude, you even got to trick him. Just show him your stats, dude.
I'm sure at this point he knows just the jackass that I am, but I know that he's a season ticket holder at Wrigley Field. So once I figure out where his seat is, he's in trouble. So I'm going to find him, and then that's going to be where I do the asking. So I look forward to returning to the Wrigley Field bleachers here in about a week. And just enjoying baseball.
I mean, now that Sasha's done, can we just dump Bobby and bring Sasha on all the time? Or
Bobby's always going to be a staple.
Bobby, but...
Bobby's always going to be a staple. He's stuck, but Sasha, he'll be, depending on what he's doing professionally. I know he certainly has professional basketball goals in mind. We'll see how the summer goes. I personally would like to bring him on, but if it doesn't seem right, we can just wait till the beginning of next year to bring him back to ask him his thoughts for next year's team, obviously, he's going to start getting real busy with his professional basketball life. There could be a summer league opportunity, at Vegas for the NBA is my hope.
Europe, either one.
And then
people forget that guys make a shit ton of money in Europe and Asia right now.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's overseas,
no longer just the NBA.
Right. Whether it's overseas or here,
right.
He is going to play professional basketball. It's just a matter of where. And anybody that doubts Sasha Stefanovic, I laugh at, because there's been plenty of doubters here these last, 6 years, ever since it started to become a thing that he was going to go to Division I, Big Ten, Purdue,
right.
All those people that doubted him were wrong. And anyone that is still doubting him at this point about where he can go next is going to be wrong too. So I look forward to the next chapter in his journey. It's been a lot of fun following him, from Crown Point High School and hitting some of the biggest shots in that school's history. And then coming to Purdue and being quite a solid, I think he's 7th all time in 3-pointers at Purdue ever. So that's nothing to hold your head about. He's got a lot to be proud of. He had some big time shots for this school, and it was really fun to follow it all along. And now I have become a Purdue fan because of it, and I thank him for that, because it's been a lot of fun getting to know you and everybody else in the Purdue family, and it's going to be fun to continue to do this coverage as we go forward. And maybe we'll do more post-game shows and try to ramp up the coverage, because it was just between all the travel and all the games I went to, I think it was tricky. So we did a lot of midweek stuff, but I think as we go forward with this,
maybe we can do some crossover shows, and whoever, bring Brian on, or bring Game Day Gabby's Michelob.
Yeah, Gabby and Habitual Boiler and Riles. Those guys do a great job.
Let's do some crossover shit, man.
Yeah, absolutely. They're good people. I met Gabby and Habitual Boiler, who wants to stay anonymous. Because he likes the anonymity. And
that's a tough word, bro. I tried to get ready to say it, and then I was like, no,
anonymity. Oh boy. And they're good people, so we'll absolutely bring them on. But yeah, I think some Boilers of the future. We'll do some shows here in the off season, try to get some of those young bucks on and see where we're at. But just keep on the lookout. We'll always be updating you with shows to come. But this is the wrap up of the 2022 Purdue men's basketball season. 29 wins, top 10 all season long, a Sweet 16 appearance, the first ever number 1 ranking in the history of the program, and now a potential top 5, top 3 player being drafted in the NBA draft in Jaden Ivey. Those are a lot of different things that Purdue basketball doesn't normally have in a season, and that they had that in this season. And for the most part, for a lot of fans, it's not enough. And while that may seem cold, it's also a sign of respect of where this program is. So, while, I know a blue blood like IU would only kill to have the resume that Purdue has had the last 5 years. So keep that in mind. Craig, any final thoughts before we cut this baby loose?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, regardless of what happens next year, still have hope and faith, because I think next year's recruiting class, between me and y'all out here on Borla Die Hard Nation, is the fundamental class. Very similar. We've seen this multiple times, right? Vincent Edwards, Dakota Mathias, PJ Thompson. That was the fundamental level of the class. And then you bring in Carson Edwards behind that. I think this next year's class is the fundamental class. And then behind that, you bring in Miles Coleman, and you bring in Dre Laws Gibhorn. And those two dudes could potentially make up the best backcourt that Purdue basketball has ever seen. I think we're 3 or 4 years away from seeing the best Purdue basketball team we've ever seen. Enjoy talking to you guys all year. Braggs, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Our first year was a very successful one.
Right on.
Yeah, we did a lot of fun stuff. We obviously had Bobby on more times than he wants, but he's got no choice. We had Robbie Hummel. We had Chris Kramer,
Isaac Haas,
Rafael Davis. Yep.
Yeah.
We've had some of the best here.
The dudes
Ryan Klein. What's that?
The dudes of the dudes.
And we will continue to bring those guys back on the show, as we've built a good relationship with all of them. So keep on the lookout for former players, current players, players to come. We're going to continue to bring you as good a coverage as we can here on Braggs in the Stands. Craig, you did an absolutely phenomenal job all year long putting up with my shit. I appreciate you and what we're doing here in our friendship overall. I think we're going to have a lot of fun here going forward, talking Purdue basketball. And like I got off track a little bit ago talking about, sophomores that came on quick. But that's the thing, in my opinion, if one of these teams, you want all your players to leave early because they're that good. But I think maybe the team that gets it done will be a team that has a lot of guys that go a little further. You know what I mean? And our juniors and seniors, this team just had a lot of sophomores and 3 seniors that were certainly solid. But, like you were just saying, with these guys coming, just imagine with this group next year, then they bring in Miles Colvin and the point guard that I can never get his name right, so I won't butcher it. Then think about
from McCutcheon. He's a Lafayette kid.
Got a lot of talent. Then think about having those guys for 4 years, all together. And that's a scary proposition.
We ain't gonna have Miles Colvin for 4 years.
Probably not, but maybe we could get him till his junior year. Yeah, but like I said, you root for these guys to get to the NBA faster because that means you're bringing in great
and I
players.
don't think Purdue fans understand. Like, I don't think they get it in general because we're not used to it. When Jaden Ivey is a top 5 pick in the NBA draft, and then he goes out there and is starting for an NBA team next year, you don't understand what that does for you on a recruiting level. Like he's going to bring people to Purdue. Carson brought people to Purdue that never came to Purdue. Jaden's going to take that next level in the next 2 to 3 years.
I completely agree. That's the kind of talent you want to bring to Purdue because then it'll just continue to double down. Jim Anderson is here in the chat saying, thanks again, guys. Have a great summer. See you next season and Boiler Up. We appreciate you and everyone else tuning in all season long, Jim. It's been a lot of fun. We're going to try to continue to do some coverage in the summertime. I do a lot of baseball with my Cubbies and football comes in August for training camp with my Chicago Bears. So
you can't post video anymore, though.
You'll have to forgive me with I do what I want. You'll have to forgive me, as I move on to my Chicago sports team. Chicago Bulls are going to go to the playoffs. It may not be long-lived, but they're getting there. Hopefully, they're fighting their way to a playing game right now. But, this is Braggs in the Stands, so where I go is what I cover. And but that's not going to change with Purdue basketball. So we will continue to do Purdue men's basketball coverage. Even throughout the summer, we'll do some shows here and there. So just keep on the lookout for announcements, and we'll continue to do that. So I'm going to wrap things up with some videos of the best moments of the year. So that's how we're going to end it. So for Craig Bowers of Boiler Diehards Facebook group, one of the most popular Facebook groups for Boiler sports, make sure you join it. For Craig Bowers, I am Gregory Braggs Jr., and this is Braggs in the Stands, and always, always Boiler Up.
Oh, yeah.
Rebels in the